I want to be honest with my spouse, but it's hard when it hits their shame. Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast.
I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler.
We're brothers,
We're therapists.
and we know recovery.
Bring your stories, your questions, your successes with real recovery.
Hey, Tyler, you ready to have some hard conversations?
Let's do it.
Let the Therapy Brothers podcast begin. Tyler,
Brannon, how are you doing, man?
I'm just doing my thing, I'm doing really well.
You are doing really well. In fact, maybe we're breaking the news a little too soon, but from what I understand, just learning yesterday at family dinner, you had a 10-mile run after family dinner because you and your wife were training for a marathon. Is that right?
Hey, I got it done. It sucked. It sucked bad, but yeah, I did it. I got a long ways to go before I start talking about running a marathon, but I'm trying to work toward it.
No, you got 10 miles down yesterday. Good for you, man. Way to go.
Yeah. Hey, we've run a half marathon before. It was my one victory over you athletically. Like I had trained, and you were running on a hip that needed hip replacement. And I think I beat you by like 20 minutes, and I was so proud.
Hey, take full glory in that, man. You beat me fair and square. So we trained for a half marathon. It was like for a cancer survivors kind of marathon, and we were actually running for your mother-in-law and for an uncle of ours who had passed away from cancer. And you called up like a week before or something. You're like, hey, you called me and Rex, hey, come run this half marathon with me. And you painted yourself pink, if I remember. Like I have pictures of you looking like a leprechaun or something, like pink leprechaun. But you did. You beat us for sure. And I remember that race because I was in pain for like a week afterwards. So there's merit to training for sure. But
yeah, that's fun.
Anyway, we got a good guest on today, Brannon. We have Candace with us. Candace, thank you for coming on. And if you don't mind, just share whatever part of your story you want to and ask your question.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. My husband and I have been married for about 23 years. We got married when I was 18 and he was 22. Kind of traditional LDS story background there. We have 5 sons, ages 22, and our youngest is 8, all boys. So I would say our marriage, throughout the majority of our marriage, probably 21, 22 years, I would say that we had a very kind of volatile marriage where there was abuse, physical abuse, mainly with my 2 older sons. My husband is a very kind, loving, kind-hearted person. And I never could quite figure out what would happen, but he would have these, when he'd get upset, and how it is raising 5 boys, he would kind of cross the line into physical altercations with my sons I would say from a young age, from probably 10 to 15. And I never sought help because I was afraid somebody would tell me he was abusive. And he had this other side that was very kind and loving, and it didn't happen all the time. And he would always profusely apologize and realize what he had done wrong. And I realize now that the pattern of behavior, it was a pattern of behavior when I was looking at it as isolated instances every time that he'd make a mistake and then he'd apologize and then it would never happen again and I mean, honestly, I can say this probably happened for like a good 10 to 12 years of our marriage, where I just kept thinking, oh, well, we talked about it and it wouldn't happen again. So about 5-6 years ago, my sons started to make choices. They had a friend that passed away while they were a freshman in high school. And that kind of was the catalyst that made them kind of start making bad choices and acting out, and just making choices that we kind of were worried about. And because of this, also the fights and the arguments kind of escalated and got like worse and worse. And I remember that we put my son into like a 3-day holding facility because he kept running away. And I think at this time he was 14, turning 15. And he had also just gotten in a fight with my husband. And I remember just doing the intake session with the nurse and her seeing, just marks on his body, and had already talked to him. And he said that I got in, a fight with my father. And so she kind of called me in to kind of talk to me about that. And I would say that was a turning point for me, because it wasn't just in our little circle. It was because of what had happened, what was happening, what I had been living with was kind of being exposed to kind of the outside world. And so during that time, my son went to this place called Anasazi. I'm sure you've heard of Anasazi. And did really great. And we actually moved during that time. I moved to Arizona. My husband stayed in Texas. And we lived apart for 3 years, not necessarily to have like a separation, but just to give my sons like a new start of not being in the same environment. But that also kind of just started on my journey of figuring out how to do stuff different. I would say, like, if we're talking in terms of like attachment styles, maybe during the majority of our marriage, I was anxious. He was avoidant. And so during the time we lived separated, but we're still married and still trying to have a good marriage. He came out with a pornography addiction about 3 or 4 years ago. And so that was super shocking to me, because I had tried to talk to him about things multiple times of if that was ever a problem, and he told me no. And so it was shocking for me to kind of have this revelation happen. So now I think that we're in this space where we both have been doing work. We've been going through therapy. I think he's doing really well. I think I'm doing really well in a lot of ways. But the dynamic is kind of shifted a little bit, where because I've drawn lines of not wanting my marriage to be how it was in the past and how it's different. I think it's kind of spiraled him into being anxiously attached. And I think because of the abuse and then the pornography on top of that, that's kind of spiraled me to being a little bit more on the avoidance side. And I'm aware of that. And I know that it's something that I want to change. But I think a couple of things that I have a problem with is because that's the dynamic now, because I've talked about divorce or me not being okay about certain things in our marriage, and it's kind of shifted a little bit. It's caused him to be very insecure in our marriage. And so I feel like what happens is we play this dance. We have this dance going on where he is not fully honest with me because he doesn't want to leave. He doesn't want me to leave him. And he's worried about me, my reactions. And then I feel the need to be honest of the place that I'm at, that Because for me, it's not just about the pornography addiction. If it was just that, I feel like, I could get over things. I mean, for me, it's the combination of what's happened the majority of our marriage, and the pornography kind of was like, I mean, I don't want to say the nail in the coffin because we're not in a coffin yet. And I still have a desire to be in the marriage, and he still has a desire to be in the marriage, but we're trying to shift into this new dynamic, and I feel like it's not going well. So I don't know if you could figure out a question in there, but I feel like I'm not fully being honest and he's not fully being honest because he doesn't want to lose me. And I feel like when I'm honest, it really sends him in a shame spiral where it like hinders his progress.
Tyler, do you want to start?
Yeah. So just so that I'm making sure I'm clear on this, Candace, you are both withholding certain kinds of discussions for fear of the other's response. That's what you're saying. And you want to be honest, but you want to be honest in a way that he can possibly hold it and that you don't feel like you're making his work worse or harder. So you're not necessarily afraid of his shame then coming out with the anger again on you. You're more worried about sharing because you're afraid of the pain that, or perceived pain that you're going to cause him if you're honest about your feelings or where you're currently at emotionally.
Yes, I would agree. But I would also say, to your point about being worried about the anger, that is still really in me to kind of caretake his feelings and be worried about things being explosive, even though with me, he was never physically abusive. It was more verbal. I still, and I have seen, I think he's worked on it a ton and he's done a lot of work, but there is still threads of that, like, explosive kind of volatility. And so I think it's both. Right now, currently in our marriage, I definitely think it's like the shame spiral thing, but there is still like that inner part of me that is worried about his temper, I guess.
You say there's threads of that volatility still. And when you look at that, this is what's kind of going on in my mind. My question is, are you having a trauma response to him because it's been so volatile for so long? Or is there still evidence that there's still unsafety there and that he is volatile and could go over the edge in some ways?
I feel like it's both. I definitely feel like I have trauma responses that I haven't worked through, and I have done some trauma therapy to work through some of those. But I also kind of feel like he keeps it hidden or I worry that he keeps it hidden because he just doesn't want to lose me, and he loves me. And I do feel like he loves me. And now that I have done work, I know that he is those two people. He loves me and he's caring and he's a good dad and he's a good husband. And when he gets out of his window of tolerance, he's been abusive. So I've seen threads, meaning kind of that aggression or assertiveness will kind of rise up, and then, but not to the degree that it did before. And he silences it down pretty fast. Right. And also if there's any kind of hint of that, I shut down, or I get super, I walk away, like I don't engage in it. I definitely don't.
Your avoidant kicks in.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Like I get quiet. I get stealthily quiet. I want to run away. I want to just have him. I feel like I go dark really fast, where I'm like, oh, there it is again. Oh, there he is. He's back. This is the person I know. You know, this other person that is in recovery, making things better. Like, that's not true. This is what I've seen for 21 years, 22 years.
Sounds like there's a lot of fear in the relationship on both ends. He's
Yeah.
scared of losing you. You're scared of him going back to his old ways. And that fear undermines intimacy. It undermines trust and connection. Now, here's the thing. That fear is probably valid. It's probably there for a reason. And so we don't want to just say, hey, Candace, don't feel fear. Like, just get over it and just like be vulnerable with him. It's probably there for a reason. And for him to rebuild trust with you, it's a process, and it's a step-by-step process that needs to happen. And if that process doesn't happen, you're not going to automatically have that safety in your relationship, right? Tyler, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts going on with where this is going. One is, let's just go down that train for a second, Brannon. And this is maybe something that, Candace, you can kind of think about and even answer a little bit, is there is maybe a little bit of both right now, where there's still the volatility, maybe not to the level that it has been. And maybe you're almost feeling like he's bottling it up, even though it's still churning on underneath the surface. So there's legitimate worry there, but it also, if I'm reading this right, it feels safe enough to you to be coming onto our show asking, how do I get more of a voice? So there's enough progress, at least in your mind, towards the direction you want to be going, that you're willing to lean in a little bit to saying, how can I have these little bit of a different conversation than maybe just avoiding it altogether? And what, Brannon, I think you're saying is, safety and trust take time to establish, and you're probably not going to get to the depths of those conversations without some level or semblance of safety and trust. And the question is it trending in the right direction, and how do you know that?
Yeah,
I definitely, I think you summed it up really great. I think that I think there is enough safety and trust that he's provided. And I also think that I have changed the dynamic a little bit of telling him and not, I mean, I don't want to say putting up with, because I don't like that, but not allowing that same dynamic to exist in our marriage.
you will cut it off.
Yeah.
You'll cut it off. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that there's some strength on my part. And I think that for me to, that's why it's a little bit confusing, our situation, because it's not just the pornography and the betrayal, although that's part of it. I feel like the attachment wounds happened before that. And so even though that it's not happening anymore, and especially not with the children, like the volatility, but there's just still those wounds. And if anything breathes of that, it's like it's like a stab wound that gets opened up and starts bleeding again. And I feel like he has done a good job at providing safety for me. Just more recently, I've seen, like, especially with recovery and stuff, I do feel like he's being more honest and open, but there is still an element that I can't fully be honest of the impact, because it's painful. It's painful for him, and it makes him feel like I can't ever get over this. You can't ever move on past this. But our marriage was more volatile than it wasn't. And so it's, even though things have been better the past 3 years, there's a lot of brain rewiring that's still there, right? That brain wiring of being me caretaking his feelings, or me being anxious about his reactions. We're not just drastically different people, although I do feel like we are moving in the right direction.
Can he empathize with you?
Truthfully, I feel like it's hard for him, because I feel like now I realize this is my paradigm, but it always feels like it's about him. Like everything is about him all the time. His hurt,
Candace,
his pain.
Here's the thing, like you'll know if he's empathizing. You'll feel that.
You'll feel it.
Like you'll feel that space, you'll feel seen, you'll feel felt, like understood. And what I'm kind of seeing with your face is that you're making, what you're saying is like, I want to say that he could, but I don't feel it from him. Right.
No, I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I feel like he can't empathize without the shame spiral connected. And so then it turns into me caretaking and me, like, or not necessarily caretaking, but me telling him, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here. I still want to be in our marriage. I care about you, instead of like the hurt and the empathizing with me. I don't feel like he can handle it. Like, honestly,
the reparation work will not happen unless empathy is a piece of it. Tyler, it looks like you want to add something.
Oh, you're going right the same direction, Brannon. But basically, I'm thinking a couple of thoughts that I would just want to like smash together for you to think about. All right, Candace. First is, it's pretty typical that the work on the relationship in recovery is only as good as the time and effort and energy to rebuild trust paired up with the individual work that leads to the boundaries work. So if you trust yourself to have healthy boundaries, you can lean in further. And if there's more time and trust established, you can lean in further. Right. And then the work that you guys have in front of you right now is the practice of, he gets to practice holding space and showing empathy. You get to practice being honest and not rescuing him from his feelings. And that repetition that you guys have is constantly ending with the same old pattern of, oh, I better hurry and caretake him because he can't hold my stuff anymore. So I either won't share it, or if I do share it, I'll end up feeling like I just got it flipped on me again. Right. The work itself isn't bad. And what Brannon's saying, and this is really important, is that there is a directly inverse proportion to shame and empathy. The more shame that's present in our interaction, the less empathy there can be. And so the practice is to learn how to become shame resilient, maybe on both sides. And the more shame resilient.
We lost Tyler for a second.
okay.
He'll come back. But Tyler, we lost you there for just a second.
Okay.
But you were saying the practice is to become more shame resilient.
The practice for both is to become more shame resilient. That's the individual work, so that then we step into our relationship. If we're looking at emotion focused couples therapy, the avoider needs to learn how to approach and hold space. The pursuer needs to learn how to soften the approach. And then in the middle is where we meet for the practice.
But Tyler, I got to say, like, this sounds great. Like what you're saying is, yes, it sounds great. But the lack of empathy, just like you just said, is proportionate to the amount of shame in the relationship.
That's right.
To me, the relationship is a reflector, and it's just it's feedback to individual healing and recovery. And what the lack of empathy is illustrating is that the root has not been rooted out. That it's still in there. The pain, the trauma, the fears are still underneath. And he can smile, and there's the real genuine side of him that's the nice guy, that he's a good guy, right? He can smile and try to use that as much as he possibly can to keep you around. But unless he does that real recovery work, that real deep recovery work on himself, he can try to practice all day long with you to empathize. Unless he does that, it won't be genuine and it won't be real. and he won't be able to really step in that with you, and vice versa for you too, Candace, to connect to him is the same thing, right? So
Brannon,
go ahead.
she is saying, though, if I heard her right, that she's saying that she is seeing that he is putting in the work on that side of the recovery. He's just not there to be able to hold it very well yet.
But I have a question about the work, and Candace, maybe you can answer this. There's a difference between someone going to therapy and going to group, and yeah, I do the work. I'm putting in the work, and somebody doing the work. The bottom up, not top down,
inside out.
Inside out work of my heart's going to shift. I'm going to know who I am. I'm going to show up as a healthy masculine man in this relationship because I know God and I know God loves me in this way. And I've had those answers given to me. That's the work. The work isn't just listen to this podcast and go to therapy, right? So I want to come back to you, Candace, is, like doing the work.
I would say he's trying, but I think he struggles with the depth of it. Like, I do think that him starting to do the work was because of my boundaries, putting boundaries of needing to get therapy together, and he has a men's group that he's involved with. But up until recently, I have noticed a slight more of a shift of him doing, working towards doing the more work, but I feel like it's almost too overwhelming for him.
Mm-hmm.
And like he hasn't quite developed the strength to manage the work that it does take. It's like it's very surface level, like, oh, okay, I shouldn't say it's surface level, but I would say it's I'm not sure he's quite willing to go super deep yet, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so, which I think you'd expect. I mean, that's kind of the
it's
process.
A process.
It's a process that does happen sometimes that way, where he's not going to be instantly shame resilient and empathetic a month into recovery or whatever, but there needs to be a trajectory and a feeling. I think what Brandon's saying is, do you get the feeling that he's genuinely trying to learn how to be shame resilient on his own, or is he still in a compliant mode trying to just appease you? Because if he is, he'll never get empathy right, because he'll never get shame resiliency. But if he's actually doing those things, and you're right, I think, Candace, that it takes time to build a team of support to push you back into your work. It takes time to start doing your dailies, to building your bottom lines, to doing some mindfulness, to taking ownership. And if he's doing those things and putting blocks in place, then he will eventually get to where he can come and practice that, and maybe not be perfect, but then come back and be like, oh, dang, yeah, I was out of my best self. Like, let's do this again, but if he's not doing those putting those blocks in place, you're going to continue to repeat the history that you're repeating right now.
Yeah, I think that you guys nailed it. I think that he wants to do the work and he has started to do the work, but has it been a complete deep dive? No. And I do think that part of it is appeasing, and part of it, like for instance, when we talk about shame, or we talk about me being like, when I am more honest with him, I feel like he'll say stuff like, well, I can't be honest with you because of how you act, or, your reaction, or like it always kind of gets spilled into like he is not able to be who he should be because of me.
Listen what you want from him, Candace, because it's such a catch-22. Like he needs to get comfortable with pissing you off and having you be uncomfortable. No, I'm not saying go out of his way to piss you off, right?
No.
But like, you want a man that can hold that space of like, hey, this might freak you out. And coming back to the honesty thing, like, be honest no matter what, but be kind while you're being honest at the same time. You want that from him, right?
Exactly. So I feel like he still has two sides to him, even though they're less. He'll have like a I mean, pardon my words, but like an asshole side,
Mhm.
right? And then super compliant, super passive, like, I'll do whatever you want, please don't leave me side.
Yeah. So
And
who?
that's not what I want. I want him, I want him to be kind, but I want him to want to fight for what he wants in his life. Whether I want him to be okay without me, not because I want to be without him, but because I just want to know that he can be okay without me.
Right. And the truth is you want to actually know the real him.
Yes.
Like,
and I
whoever
don't
he
feel
is.
I don't feel like I do. And I don't, like, as we are trying to do this journey, I do wonder, are we compatible? We're very different people than what we were when, I'm a very different person than the 18-year-old that he married.
Right.
And part of me feels like I don't know that it just seems like as we're doing the work, things are better, but there's also this element of growing apart. And I think it kind of freaks both of us out.
Right.
I think.
Yep.
Sure. So I think where you're going, this is important because you're asking, how can I help things go right? I think you've outlined the pattern. We're on the same page with the pattern. There's a couple of things. There's also another side to this. So the good thing is he was at least honest enough with you to say, hey, you freak me out and I don't like being honest with you because I can't stand your reaction, right? Like, okay, there's two sides to that. One is that he's probably inserting you in God's place, and so anytime you're disappointed, that's his work to
It
do.
means so much.
Yeah, that's his work to do. He needs to let that go. But there might be a curious question you ask yourself to say, oh, is there something that I could do to still be honest but be more approachable? If there is, I'll work on it, and I can
And
go
be
to work on
safe.
my own
Sure.
stuff. Like, right, that part of it. The next piece is that you just said this, I want to be with a man who can be kind to me, but who can also be honest with himself and his feelings, and not have to like disappear and either be in asshole mode or disappear mode, but maybe can just hold the space and let us have a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the way that you go to work on that, if you're going to have those conversations, is you go to work on that by inviting that from him in the way that you talk with him.
So basically do what you want.
Yeah. So you go to him and you say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. This is what's going on for me. I want to be honest with you because that's important to me. And he starts to disappear. He starts to go into asshole mode, right? Right at that point it out, and then insert a call up to the man that you know he wants to be and that you want him to be. Like, hey, I can sense that this is hard for you. I know that you're disappearing on me. I don't need you to do that. If you can stay here and participate, I'd love to keep talking. If not, we'll talk later. Boom. Now it's like, I believe you're capable of hearing this. And I believe you actually want to, because you want to be that kind of a man to hold space for me. Right. Boom. There's an invitation.
Which could trigger his shame again.
And if it does, then he goes into one of those two places. And then that's when you go, hey, we'll try again later. But instead of going like, oh my gosh, you're being a baby, or, oh man, you're being such an asshole, you're more in saying, I actually believe you're capable of this. If we can keep going, I love that. If not, I'm not chasing it anymore. I'm not going to go overboard and go chase you back down and be like, no, you're a good man. I promise you're still a good guy. I'm not leaving you anymore. You're just going to go, oh yeah, our practice is done now. We'll practice later. Like, because we're not doing the same dance anymore.
Yeah, because my misstep in that completely is I go avoid it, and I'm like, oh, there's that guy, and then I'm out. I shell up. I go radio silent. And I think that is my misstep, is being able to stand in my strength and not run away or get quiet, but also still engage in the relationship.
You could, in a sense, say, I still see you. I'm just not playing the game anymore.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. It's hard.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Candace, please.
No, I was just going to say, like, do you feel like I want to feel different?
Yes.
I want to have love and adoration for him.
Mm.
But it almost feels like when you cut the strings of a balloon and they like float away. And do you see that people can, just from what you know of what I've told you in my situation, like, can somebody in my position heal and feel that same way with somebody that has kind of been abusive to my children, to our children? And can that be mended?
I mean, I have Candace, I have a brother who's done that with his wife, and he happens to be here today. Now Tyler wasn't abusive to his kids or anything, but he broke trust pretty badly and has a pretty awesome marriage and relationship now. And so is there hope for recovery? Here's the other thing, and Tyler, I'll let you speak to that because I brought you up, but you can't have back how it felt when you first married him. The history is the history. Those things have happened. You can have back better than that. You can have back trust that most couples don't get to experience because of the hell that you've been through. And you can have back intimacy that you've probably levels of intimacy that you've never reached. However, to have that means to do your own interpersonal work, so much so that you can stand on your own 2 feet and be healthy and be honest and empathetic and consistent in your relationship. So it will never be the same, but it can absolutely be better. But both of you got to be committed to your own individual work and healing in order for that to happen. And if both of you aren't committed to that, if you start to get really, really healthy, Candace, and he stays where he's at, it'll probably push you further apart, right?
I feel like that's what's been happening. Probably there's probably just, yeah, I would say that that's what's happening a little bit, even though he is doing his work. I think it could be more.
I'd love to know the wounds that he has and the trauma. You don't have to tell me right now. I'm just saying this because he'll probably listen to this, but the work is addressing those wounds and the work is reconciling that. And Tyler, I brought you up. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot. I'll finish your sentence first, Brannon. The work is also heeding the call to step back into the man you were designed to be by God. God's calling you to it. Your wife's calling you to it. It's stepping into that. And that's something that I had to learn the hard way. And Candace, I just want to say, like, hearing your voice and seeing the look on your face as you were mentioning those things just brought so much flood of emotion to me, because I said, that's us. Like, in so many ways, maybe not all the details, but so many ways, that's us. And I can see and feel the ache in your heart. Sorry, get emotional. I feel like I was just looking at my wife, so so is there hope? Absolutely, 100% there is hope. And it's not, and Brannon said something that's really important, not to go back to what you had. You've been through too much hell to go back to what you've had. You have to fight for something that's new, something that's better, something that's deeper. And if you get 2 people who are willing to go to work on themselves, on their hearts, on their own healing, on their own shame, on their own trauma, and 2 people who believe in the power and process of forgiveness, that I can unequivocally tell you that my life and my relationship is far better than it ever was and ever could have been. And there is absolutely hope here, but it takes that kind of work. And I can tell you how grateful I was that my wife finally figured out how to stop doing the dance that we used to do. I was the guy who was the disappear guy. I was the you're right. I'm so bad. You deserved someone else. I should never have married you. I've ruined your whole life. I'm not good enough. And then she'd step over and be like, no, 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 you're a good guy. Don't disappear from me. Like, don't leave. Like, and then we never actually addressed the real issue. And the real issue was, Tyler, I need you to step into the place of being able to hold my emotion and let me be a human being who has my own feelings and just see me. I just need you to love me. I just need you to acknowledge that there's been pain that's been caused here, and I don't need you to disappear. And I don't need you to complain about it. I need you to just be here. And when she started to learn some of the things that we're talking about here, where she was able to say, hey, Tyler, I need to talk to you about this thing that's going to be really hard to talk about. Are you in a place to do that? I believe you're capable of holding this. Boom, call up, call up, call up. I'd start to shrink away and she'd say, hey, Tyler, like, I know this is hard for you, but I just need you to listen. And if you can, let's keep talking. And if not, we're going to try later. Like, that was a gift because it was a call out every single time. Even in the timeouts, I'd go sit in my own head and go, dang, I missed it. I missed it. I missed it. But the only reason why that was happening is because I was doing the individual work on the inside too. Right. Instead of going away and then being like, oh, she's so mean. She's always just complaining about stuff. It was more like, no, what else? What am I missing? Why couldn't I hold it? Like, where did I break down at? And Brannon doesn't know this, but there were times when I'd call him in these times and I just needed a voice to say, okay, yeah, Tyler, that's hard. What are you going to do about it? Like, get back into it. Like, what does your wife need? Right. And, if he has those tools around him to push him back in, if you have those tools around you to go and be like, okay, deep breath, it still seems like it's worth practicing. I'm going to go practice again. And you have some people to support you in that. There's a lot of hope here, Candace. So that's a long answer to your question, but I feel very strongly about it.
Thank you. Thank you. That was really helpful. And thank you for sharing, a bit of your story. And yeah, thank you.
One thing I want to add before we let you go is, and this is kind of another thing, dynamic here is, if I jump into a lion's den and a lion bites me, and I get out of the den alive, should I jump in that den again?
No.
Like, who would, right?
Well, Brannon, you would if you went and learned how to become a lion tamer and went back down there with a whip and some skills.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a great point, because your side of the fence is really important, Candace, for you to say, I'm going to go strengthen myself, and not to fortify myself against connection, but just to be as solid and grounded as I possibly can be, so that I'm not desperate for this marriage to work out. I'm not desperate for him. I am confident. I know who I am. I have my support systems. And if you do that, it might, your gut and your intuition might be so in tune that you might realize, I don't want to jump in that lion's den again. Like, I'm healthy enough that I don't want to jump in there. And some of your fear of not engaging with him, and you say you have avoidant attachment now,
Mm-hmm.
it might be kind of spot on in protecting you, because there's not full recovery there and there's not full safety there, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, his side of the fence as the lion is, instead of being a vicious lion, he needs to learn how to tame and calm that ferocity inside of him. And to understand who he truly is, and realize that he's not a person that wants to hurt anyone, your sons or you. And how do you know when he's safe? How do you know when you can stand next to him again? How do you know, Candace? What do you think?
Well, I don't know. And I feel like what's happening right now is this kind of false safety.
Yeah.
That he's trying, but it's not quite there yet. So I don't know if we just continue on this path, and eventually we'll get there, or if something needs to be different.
So everything we've talked about today, you don't know. Actually, you do know that you're not safe. Mm-hmm. And I can tell, I can feel that from you. You do know that you're not safe with him. that brought some emotion up for you, Candace. Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
want to be safe, though, is the problem.
Right. But you know that you're not. And one of the big reasons is because you don't feel that connection from him. You don't feel that empathy piece from him. And so because of that, and until that's in place, you're not going to fully engage. Hopefully not. You're not going to fully engage. And what I want to say is, the broken trust and safety, the abuse to your sons, the pornography use and the betrayal, that's his responsibility to repair that. And it's his job to repair that. And part of that is learning how to be an honest, empathetic man, somebody different than that asshole man. And it's his responsibility to do that. It's not your responsibility to hope that he'll be different.
Yeah.
Right. And he can man up and he can step up and he can figure out how to do this for you. And he can fight like hell for you. But just like Tyler, you brought up 22 years, 3 years of pornography addiction. It's a process. All those things. Yes, it's a process. It has been a long time. It is time to kick into gear to do that hard work. And I can tell you're on a track to being out, Candace. And if he's listening to this, he still has a chance. He still has a chance, right? But it's time to step into gear, to really engage in this day in and day out process. And he's probably thinking, I don't know what else I can do.
Yeah, that's what he's thinking.
Yeah, there's a lot. So
let there, and Brannon, to go to, like we always talk about dialectics, I agree with everything you just said, that Candace, you should not jump in the lion's den unless you have the skills or the boundaries or the desire to do so. You can take more risk leaning in if you can trust yourself and your own boundaries. That is true.
That's true. Yeah.
That's true.
That's extremely helpful.
Yeah. And unfortunately, this is the hard part, that at a certain point, and this is the dialectic to what Brannon was saying, where there's truth on both sides, is that if you wait for there to be a guarantee that you'll never get burned again, you're not going to get there.
Yeah.
Eventually there's a trend that starts. You feel the safety starting to form. You see and feel the effort. You feel the heart starting to shift. And at a certain point, you have to start placing a bet again on going in. It's still always going to still be placing a bet, but you're going to do it with as much information and with as much kind of heart yourself as possible. And so I'm with Brannon. Don't go jump all the way in if it's not safe and those lions are still hungry. But if you have good, healthy boundaries, you know who you are, you see the trends building and you go, you know what, he's not there yet, but he's making the right efforts. And I feel his heart starting to shift. Okay, I'll lean in on my boundaries as much as I can, a little bit at a time. And I've kind of always like looked at it more like this, at least the recovery in my own relationship has been this way, where it's like those little plastic balls that are like this big a fist and then they expand all the way out, that our relationship has been sort of like this contracting ball trying to get closer, but sometimes I can't hold it very well, or sometimes her trauma is too big but then we come back and we keep practicing, and eventually we've gotten to where more often we're able to stay really close together and understanding. And I've developed empathy thanks to my wife giving me the gift of practice through her boundaries. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. And I do think that I err on, traditionally, if you think about our marriage, I err on jumping in the lion's den too fast, too quick, too many times. And now I'm working on the boundaries and the safety, and not being avoidant emotionally, because before I would be only boundaried if I was mad enough, and so that's the piece that I've been working on, and it's just still difficult for him. I just think the dynamic is shifting and it's difficult for him.
Candace, you're not doing him any favors by caretaking for him, by acting as if like I'm still really in here, when your heart and your intuition is saying, I need to distance and push away. And your heart and
but how do I know that's not just my avoidance?
It's interesting because you're saying two things. You used to jump in the lion's den a lot, right? And so I don't think it's your avoidance, because there's a history of abuse. There's a history of deceit. So I think this is your gut saying some things need to get corrected in order for me to jump in. Now, when his fear comes up and says, don't leave me, and you jump right in there next to him, you're caretaking for his fear, as opposed to you saying, I am kind of on the trajectory to being further from you and possibly leaving you unless some things shift. And your gut and the way that you're feeling and the way you're reacting is actually congruent with your truths. And for you to own that doesn't mean that you're divorcing him today, but don't talk yourself out of those feelings, because those feelings are there because it's not safe. Right? Do you see what I'm saying, Candace?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can set your own boundaries and still see the other person. And so you're not actually abandoning him. That's the thing, is the avoidant. The avoidant is like, boom, hands off, I'm out of here. No, I can set my boundaries. And one of the ways that you do that is through the call up. So, hey, I wanted to have a conversation with you. This isn't working. I know you want to get better at it. Are you in a spot to practice or not? No. Okay. Now you take your distance.
And then he'll be extremely uncomfortable.
And he will.
Right?
And it'll be an invitation to change the system. It's an invitation of love when it's done properly.
Yeah. We could get into a whole other episode with this one. So, Candace, we'll let you go, but I really appreciate your vulnerability, willingness to come on. I hope that was helpful in some way.
It was. I had a lot of light bulb moments. So thank you. I mean, for being able to know just a little bit of our information, I felt like you guys both were very spot on. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your courage to come on, and your conversation was a real gift to a lot of people. So thank you so much.
All right, you guys, have a wonderful day. We'll see you guys later.